Your cybersecurity solution is here. Introducing Pentester's Advanced Cybersecurity Suite. Ready for peace of mind? Try it for free. No credit card required. Pentester.com.
I like this movies, and then all of a sudden, the guy's driving down, in LA on a white Bronco, and there's 100 cop cars chasing him. I was home. I was living in Lindenwood at the time. I just had gotten remarried. Was a kid, I was 10 years old, and I actually saw Oswald get shot on TV live as a kid. I went, oh, what the fuck just happened? My grandmother jumped up off the chair, the TV went blank. So I had 1,000 people at my first wedding. Every family and all 5 families were represented. There was bosses there. Paul Castellano was there. All the captains from the Gambino family. Welcome everybody to Reformed Gangsters. My name is Anthony Ruggiano Jr. If you like our content, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. Also, my Patreon. If you want to have some Q&As with me and get some real Mafia history, become a Patreon member. The membership starts at $1, goes to $20. So please check it out. I have a busy month coming up not pretty much in May. I'm doing a few things, but I got a big month in June coming up. I'll be heading up to New York. And we're going to do some mob tours because I got like a really good response from the mob tours I did in the past of Ozone Park and Howard Beach. I got really good responses, and I enjoy doing them. I enjoy driving around, and I am allowed in my neighborhoods because there's nobody left no more. Some people think I'm not allowed, but I am. Anyway, I'll be going up to New York in June, and we're going to do some mob tours, and I'm going to tour a little bit of Ozone Park. I'm going to go back to Kennedy Airport. We're going to do some tours at Kennedy Airport. A lot of mob activity took place there throughout the decades. Lufthansa and a lot of other things. I mean, it was a big mob cash register, Kennedy Airport. We're going to go past Near's Bar, where they filmed the Goodfellas scenes. That was dubbed in as Robert's Lounge. That was where they filmed the scenes that were allegedly in Robert's Lounge, were in this bar in Woodhaven. We're going to go through there. We're going to do Manhattan. We're going to go down to Little Italy, do some stuff there. Then we're actually going to go to the building in Manhattan near the 59th Street Bridge, where in 1953, my father, Fat Andy, was actually made, where this ceremony was actually held. It's the building still there. There was a bar called The Patch, was on the ground floor, which Charlie Wagons owned. And above the bar, they had an apartment. And the ceremony was actually held in that apartment. So we're going to do that tour, and then we're gonna close it out. We're going to close it out with St. John's Cemetery, which is in Queens, where my father's buried, Tony Lee's buried, John Gotti's buried, and Carlo Gambino's buried, and on and on and on. There's so many made members. Happy Mayone's buried there. And we're going to do a cemetery tour of famous gangster graves, and I'll talk a little bit about the ones that I knew or the ones I know things about. So it's going to be a fun month, and I hope everybody, checks it out. So, I was talking to my daughter today about O.J. Simpson. He died of prostate cancer, and for all those who don't know, which I'll make a personal reveal, because I know there's people out there that want to put the horns on me. But anyway, 2 years ago, I actually had prostate cancer, and I had my prostate removed. And thank God I didn't lose any of my nerves along the prostate, and I didn't have any of my lymph nodes. And I'm a cancer survivor. He died of prostate cancer. I don't know how he didn't catch it in time, because it's a disease that could be prevented, if you go for, I was in great shape. I didn't even have a symptom, and I just went for a wellness checkup for my age and for my health insurance, and my PSA was through the roof, and my doctor told me to see a urologist, and lo and behold, I had prostate cancer without having a symptom. So, it's a silent killer for men, middle-aged men. And I advise everybody out there that's listening to us right now to go get checked out because, I'm the survivor and OJ died. Getting back to OJ, I was a big OJ fan. I mean, not even when he played for the Bills, he was I was a fanatical Jet fan back then. I was a Joe Namath guy. I love Joe Namath. And, actually, there's a famous game in Shea Stadium in the snow that OJ ran for like crazy amounts of yards in the game, like 200 yards or whatever. I was actually at that game against Buffalo against the Jets back in the day in the 60s. I was actually at that game. I used to go to a lot of Jet games at Shea Stadium because it wasn't far from Ozone Park. And like I said, so I was a big OJ fan, and I liked his movies. And then all of a sudden, the guy's driving down, in LA on a white Bronco, and there's 100 cop cars chasing him. I was home. I was living in Lindenwood at the time. I just had gotten remarried. My daughter was just born. She was an infant, and I remember watching it on TV in my living room. My wife at the time watching this guy, and that's when I knew he was guilty. I mean, you could say whatever you want to say. We all know the guy did it. It was a fit of rage. And he's probably all beeped up, lit up, and it was very racial, and he, we all know why he got found out guilty, because they just punished the LAPD because they were all racist with the Rodney King incident, whatever else was going on out there, and that stupid lady made them put the gloves on that were laying around for months. I mean, of course they fucking shrunk. Come on, they were full of blood. You think leather's not going to shrink? I mean, I don't know what was possessed her to let him put the gloves on. But anyway, yeah, I was home watching it, the trial every day on, we were watching it. I would come home, for 3, 4 in the afternoon, and my wife and I would watch it. I remember the day the jury came in with the not guilty verdict, those are one of the things, you always remember where you were when Elvis died. I was on Pickett Avenue with my friend Larry driving in a car, and it came on the radio that Elvis, and I was a big Elvis Presley fan. Like, I loved Elvis Presley. I had seen him in person. I took my grandmother to see him in 1971 at Madison Square Garden. I took my grandmother and my brother and my sister. My father got me 4 tickets to see him live. I was driving down Pickett Avenue, and I had just gotten married. It was 1977. I remember I had just gotten married, and it came on the radio that he died, and I was so upset. I went home to my parents' house, and I walked in, and my father was sitting in this big gangster was sitting at the table, and he said, "What's the matter?" And I went, "Elvis died." Like, I was so fucking upset, and he goes, "Elvis died? Who gives a fuck? Go home to your wife." He told me. He goes, "What are you doing here?" I went to my mother's house. I was so upset. Even I could go back to Kennedy. I mean, I was alive when Kennedy got shot. Where were you when Kennedy got shot? I was in I remember like it was yesterday. I was in the 4th grade in PS 58, which is no longer in Ozone Park anymore. They knocked down the building and built a junior high school 210 there. Elizabeth Blackwell Junior High 210 they built there. But back in the day, it was PS 58. And I was in PS 58. And I remember like it was yesterday. Another teacher walked into my class, and my teacher's name was Miss Blocker. I'll never forget, it's so crazy, some of the things that I remember. I don't remember what I ate for lunch yesterday, but I remember Miss Blucker's name from 1963. And I remember the teacher came in the classroom and took my teacher out of the classroom, and she was out there for a couple of minutes, and then she came back into the classroom and she was crying. And she was crying, and she told us the president was just shot. We didn't know he was dead yet. She might have known, but she didn't tell us. She just told us he was shot, and she was crying. And back then, back then, everybody's mothers was home, not like today. Back then, everybody's mother was home. So they took us all to the auditorium, and they started manually, because there was no Amber Alerts back then, you know what I mean? Or emails or whatever the fuck, or, text messages. Like, they could send out 10,000 text messages at once. So they had to manually call all our parents up, and they took us all to the auditorium, and our mothers all started showing up, taking us home. They closed the school down, and my mother came and got me and took us home. And then I found out he was dead. It was all over the TV. And that was crazy. That was crazy because then I was watching. What happened was I wound up I don't know, because school was closed, and my mother and I used to love to stay by my grandmother's house in Brooklyn. And I remember my mother took me by my grandmother's house, and I stood there for the whole week. And we watched the funeral together, my grandmother and I, on a little black and white TV. And I actually was a kid, I was 10 years old, and I actually saw Oswald get shot on TV live as a kid. I went, oh, what the fuck just happened? My grandmother jumped up off the chair, the TV went blank, so it was crazy. So and I remember watching it all on TV. And it's funny because my father, let's throw a little mob stuff in it to it. My father hated the Kennedys, like he fucking hated them with a passion, like hated them. I guess the whole mob. I didn't know why. I was a kid because and when I got older, he told me the reason was because the mob helped this guy become president because the father was a gangster. Joe Kennedy was a gangster, was a bootlegger, and then when he became president, he double-crossed everybody and made his brother Robert the attorney general, and they went after the Teamsters and they went after the mob who helped them. And actually, then he got shot in the head, and he hated them, and he wasn't upset that I was and I would come home and I would have the newspaper article. I was a little kid, and he would just grunt like, but because we were watching it on TV all the time in my grandmother's house. So you always remember stuff like that. And then, with OJ, so what else do I remember?
Did OJ pay a Gambino gangster? Did you see that article?
Yeah, you know what? I read that article that he paid a Gambino gangster to kill his wife. I mean, that's the first time I ever heard that. I mean, I never heard anything like that. I mean, I'm sure he knew wise guys. I'm sure he knew mob guys. I'm sure he knew them. But I never heard that. I mean, maybe he did, but I never heard it. So Alice and I, when we first got married in 1977, we had a beautiful apartment in Ozone Park, right across the street from a place that used to be called Friendly Frost. It was a big, famous appliance store that's gone. It was famous back then. People that are listening to the show right now that lived in Ozone Park will know what I'm talking about. Friendly Frost. And we had a beautiful apartment right across the street from it, but it was short-lived because we only lived there a few months because I was out on an appeal because I had gotten convicted on a case, and I was out on an appeal bond, and we moved into that apartment in September or October, right before we got married. And I lived in that apartment only till March, and then I went to prison. And then when I went to prison, Alice gave up that apartment and moved in with her parents across the street from father and son barbershop on 101st Avenue. And then when I got out of prison, Alice had rented us a studio apartment on 79th Street in Lindenwood. And that's actually where my son Anthony was born. And he lived there. We lived there. And then from there, when my grandmother passed away, Alice and I moved back into my father's house in my grandmother's apartment on 88th Street, and we stood there for a couple of years. But my wedding to Alice was a big mob event. It was like major. It was crazy because it was in this place called the Lamia, where actually Angel Gotti also got married in it years later. It was owned by this fellow named Frankie Panisi, who was really a great guy, who actually also was the owner of Plato's Retreat, which was the first sex club ever, like in Manhattan and anywhere for that matter. It was a swing club. But he was a great guy. He was directly with Paul Castellano, but my father serviced him and Tony Lee for Paul because they were old best friends. And Paul Castellano was actually at my wedding. And it was called the Lamia. It was on Ocean Parkway, and it was 3 floors, and we had the whole place. And actually, how he counted my guests was he had guys at the front door with clickers, and they were clicking people as they walked in, and they stopped at 1,000 people. So I had 1,000 people at my first wedding. Every family all 5 families were represented. There was bosses there. Paul Castellano was there. all the captains from the Gambino family. All five families had major guys there, underbosses, captains. Pennsylvania, Buffalino came, the guy that was in the Irishman. He came. He was actually the first guest to arrive that night at my wedding in the Lamia. He came. Oh my God, it was so many. Neil Della Croce, unfortunately, was in prison at the time. He didn't come. Jay Black, the singer, unfortunately he didn't come either. He was touring. He didn't come. But it was, and John Gotti wasn't there because he was in prison at the time. So he didn't come. He was in prison. But everybody was there. I got about $60,000 in envelopes, which was a lot of money for 1977. The next day we opened up the envelopes. I had about 60,000 and change in cash, no checks. Yeah, all cash money. And it was great, it was all night. It was crazy because people like 12, 1 o'clock at night, guys were leaving with their wives and girlfriends, and then they would come back. They were coming back by themselves. And then 3 in the morning, there was 400 guys there with no woman. And my father was holding court. And at the end, and as people left, we were giving them out. We had people at the door. And when people left, we gave them a bag of bagels, fresh bagels, and a Sunday newspaper. Because back then the newspaper were big, and the Sunday Daily News was, tremendous back then. For those who remember, before the stupid internet, the Sunday News was big. And so we were giving out as people left, because it was a Saturday night, into Sunday. So when people left Sunday morning, on their way out, they all got a bag of bagels, fresh bagels, and a Sunday Daily News. And we gave them out. And then people would come back. And 3 in the morning, there was 300 guys there drinking, hanging out with my old man. It was crazy. And then on my honeymoon, I went to Vegas because on Neil Della Croce, even though he was in prison, Joe the Cat, who I'm going to do a story on, I have a really nice picture I found of Joe LaForte. I have a really nice picture of him I found on the internet.
Attention all realtors, check out listingtiger.com. Revolutionize your real estate listings with AI-powered descriptions that sell properties. Check out listingtiger.com. Use code MAGICLIST2024 for the first month free.
Right here, Joe the Cat. I'm going to do a story on him. He owned he was a soldier in the Gambino film, a very wealthy man. I worked for him for years in the number business. He owned a travel agent in Manhattan. And him and Neil, their wedding present to me was they sent me to Vegas on my honeymoon to Caesar's Palace. And I had a suite in Caesar's Palace. I had a line of credit at the casino. And it was crazy because they sent me. Now, here I am. I'm 23 years old, right? I'm just got married. I'm married to Happy Mayone's, who was a Murder Inc.'s niece, right? And I fly to Vegas. Her and I were kids. I'm 23, she's 24. I fly to Vegas. I get in a cab. I go to Caesar's Palace. Now, the underboss of the Gambino family and Joe the Cat send me there. They pay for everything. Now, the people that worked there must have known, because when I got there, the way I was right this way, Mr. Ruggiano, people were standing out. It was crazy how I was getting treated, and that was the beginning, and I loved it, and I had a line of credit. I don't know, it was a couple of $1,000. I lost it all shooting dice. I love to shoot dice. I won the first night I was there. I actually won $8,000 shooting dice. I actually won $8,000. But then through the course of the days, I saw some great shows back then. And everywhere I went, I had ringside tables. I mean, because go see this guy, go see that guy. Tell this guy sent me. Tell that guy sent me. And I'm giving out $100 tips. People are bowing right this way, Mr. and Mrs. Ruggiano. I saw Red Fox. He was great. I saw Burt Bacharach, Neil Sedaka. I mean, these are old names, but they were big stars back then. I saw I saw so many great shows there, and I was sent there by the underboss of the Gambino family. at 23 years old. What's better than that, right? Vegas. Back then, Vegas was still mob controlled. Now it's like, like it said in casino, now it's Disneyland. And, it was good times back then.
Did you have a ledger, a book where you?
Yeah. Oh, so that's a good question because that's an Italian thing. And I see people, comics, I think Sebastian Montescasco, whatever his name is, he talks about that. Putting it in, sister has it because my mother had it. And yeah, we wrote down every person and we cursed everybody that was cheap. That cheap bastard. Are you kidding me? That's all he gave? It was my fault. We were in a base. My father, my brother, and myself. The three of us were the ones that opened up the envelopes. And my mother sat there and wrote down. My mother was there too, but she didn't open up the envelopes. We did. She just had the ledger and she was writing down the names and how much money they gave. And a couple of people got cursed out pretty good. I thought maybe one or two might even have got killed later on. I don't know. They were really cheap. You know what I mean? Like, it was really surprising, And Paul Castellano but gave me $500 and he wrote in the card, "Love, Paul Castellano." And my father grabbed the card and ripped it up. If I would have had that card right now, oh my God, who knows how much his autograph would be worth, right? He gave me $500 bills. My brother was on the fringes. My brother was a criminal. He was a tough guy, a lot of balls, good fighter, great athlete when he was younger, like a really good athlete, like really good. It's a shame. He could have really done something in that field. Very intelligent, St. John's University, super intelligent. He wasn't, how could I explain it? He wasn't into it as much as I was into it. He was like on the fringes, but he was a criminal. He made all his money illegally. He had a major marijuana business back in when it was highly illegal. He made a lot of money. He made a lot of good investments back then, which are all gone now, throughout the years. But he was known as Fat Andy's son too. He knew everybody, but he wasn't into it. Like, he had no aspirations about getting made, and he never came to the Ravenite. Like, he was a neighborhood guy. He liked the neighborhood bars. He loved the Ritz. I mean, me and him hung out in the Ritz every night. I mean, he loved to hang out with, we were always in the Ritz with the celebrities and everything. I mean, he brought me to the Ritz when I got out of prison. He liked to party, but he wasn't into it like I was into it.
Did he ever get pinched?
Yeah, but not for anything, like bar fights, nothing, nothing. He was wanted for murder. He was wanted for murder, but, that didn't, he went on the lam for murder, but he never was charged with it. He was allegedly the driver on a homicide, but that never, he was never charged with it. He was a suspect.
You're heading back to Little Italy. For someone that's never been there, how would you describe the Little Italy of the 70s and 80s?
Oh, great neighborhood. When I first started going to the Ravenite in like 1970, 69 and 70, it was beautiful. I mean, it was all Italian. It was bigger than it is now. Now it's like just like a couple of blocks. I mean, everybody knew everybody. Every block was mob guys, clubs, cafes, restaurants. It was a great neighborhood. I loved going there. I was there almost every day. I mean, we went to the Ravenite every Wednesday and Saturday religiously. We went to the Ravenite every Wednesday and Saturday. We went to the Ravenite when our Neil was alive. And like I say later on, when John became the boss, we didn't go there much because we didn't like what was going on there, and you couldn't even get in the door because it was standing room only because everybody wanted to be up John's ass, and there was no need for me to go to the Ravenite anymore because John was in Ozone Park. So Tony Lee and I would see John in Ozone Park. We didn't have to trudge all the way to the Ravenite. It was a different story when O'Neill was alive because he was in Manhattan. He lived in Staten Island when he moved off Mulberry Street. No, it's a great neighborhood. I knew everybody. Everybody knew me. I loved going there. I used to walk around. It was, during the feast, it was great. I'm one of the only few guys, if you research it, that actually got arrested on Mulberry Street in 1974. I have posted the article many times on my Instagram I got arrested right there on Mulberry Street, and the old ladies were yelling, "Let him go, you son of a bitches," when they took us out of the building in handcuffs. I mean, the apartment was so old that I worked at the bathtub was in the kitchen. It was one of them apartments, like a tenement building. But it was a great neighborhood. It's totally gone now. I mean, don't forget, when I first started going there was people that lived there, generations lived there. Now they're all gone. I don't even know if there's any Italian people that live in those apartments anymore. It's probably all yuppies. How are you?
Hi, how are you doing?
I like your shirt,
I'm
Brooklyn.
so glad for cancer survivors. I'm a cancer survivor too, so God bless you for that.
Congratulations. How are you?
And thank you for being such a force for good and to inspire change also. But I was just wondering, I know you just said that you didn't know her, the girl that Greg Scarpa killed. But did you know more about why? Did you ever know why or find out why?
The reason they say was because they thought she was an informant, that she overheard conversations that she wasn't privy to hear, and they were worried she might go to law enforcement, and they killed her. It was over them being afraid that she would become an informant.
Was that highly unusual, though? Something like that? I mean, most guys, they wouldn't really tell the women what they were doing, right? I mean, they know that their heart is.
When they thought somebody overheard something, they would get killed. I mean, Tommy DeSimone did the same thing to his girlfriend. They found her in a channel in Long Island. They thought she was going to be an informant, and they killed her. So it has happened. It's happened.
Right.
It happened.
Didn't Tommy Simone, didn't he kill Foxy? Was that his wife or his sister?
No.
Was it his wife?
Foxy was, the story is that Foxy had an affair with Tommy's girlfriend or wife when Tommy was in prison. And when Tommy got out of prison, he killed Foxy.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
All right, you have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay, it was great talking to you.
All right, bye-bye. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Reform Gangsters. Don't forget, if you like my content, ring the bell and subscribe. Also, don't forget about Patreon. It's really getting good. People are starting to subscribe. There's a lot of good content, a lot of Q&As. It only starts at $1 and goes to $20. And also, don't forget about my store. We got nice hats, Reform Gangster Podcast hats, T-shirts, hoodies, mugs. Check it out. There's some holidays coming up, Mother's Day coming up, Father's Day is coming up. They make some good gifts, Fat Andy T-shirts. So check it out and have a good night. If you're enjoying my show, please join my Patreon. Ask your questions live. And please join my Patreon at reformgangsters.com.